subject of your hat, so I've seen the movie, and one thing that was interesting to me was the relationship between John and the Ring, because that goes through stages throughout the movie, and that's something that we really don't see in the comics that much, because in the comics it's like Batman's utility belt, it's like a tool, whereas there's kind of a relationship in this movie. I'd love you to speak to that if you can.
Well, look, we've read a lot of Green Lantern comics, and they always gloss over that part of Space Ring coming down and starting to talk to you, and mostly it's over in a page or two where it's like, oh, this is pretty cool, let me start using it, right? And we're like, well, it would probably be harder than that. So we wanted to make more of a meal out of that. And I think that's one of the things that worked out pretty well in this one, where you get some scenes and sequences of like what would actually happen. What would actually happen if talking Space Ring was on your finger and wouldn't get off? So, did that answer part of your question? Okay.
Were there any pitfalls from previous adaptations of Green Lantern stories that you were conscious in trying to avoid this kind of?
Well, this isn't really an adaptation. You know, when Jim first came and he was like, I want some mixing points of like, let's go hard traveling heroes, but it's not really hard traveling heroes because that was Earthbound, right? And obviously that's with Hal. We're just saying, let's use Green Arrow because of that and not somebody else. Like, not do that adventures. And certainly mixing it with Apocalypse Now kind of makes it its own animal. We didn't want to pick out a piece of this and a piece of that John Stewart story and make it, like, oh, now that's been done, right? When if this does well, then those can be adapted in a more fuller form without having the guts ripped out of them, the cool bits written out of them. So we're trying to create some new cool bits, I guess.
Obviously, you've got several different Lanterns, and many of which have been in other previous movies. How do you approach a John Stewart Green Lantern movie differently than you approach maybe another Lantern?
Well, John's got his kind of unique upbringing. I mean, there's a lot of superheroes. For some reason, you need to be rich, right? Or very well connected. And he comes from the inner city, and he had a military experience where he's got PTSD. And so I think that's kind of very unique to where he comes out. I mean, even like Spider-Man, it's like, okay, he's a normal kid, but it's like, a bully might beat me up is much different than I might die walking home in my neighborhood, So John has some real problems that he's overcome, and then he becomes a hero. So all that life experience, I think, really, it's a crucible through which the man is formed.
So you previously written Green Lantern, worked with Jim Krieg on the CGI Green Lantern animated series.
Yes.
You actually got to write Hal quite a lot, so you're actually very familiar with him. So even in the series, didn't get to it, they hinted at John Stewart. So I'm curious if you hadn't, getting this opportunity, had an itch after writing the series, fulfilling that kind of fulfillment, or...
Well, I think that series was stopped before it should have been, and we mention him, we make this John Stewart joke. Like, oh, it's John Stewart. It's like, the announcer? Right, the television personality?
These guys? Yeah.
And the second season would have had some John Stewart adventures, but they would be totally different than this. This is like a feature format. That would have been like single issues of some of John Stewart comics put into the Bruce Timm and Jim Krieg CGI Green Lantern the Animated Series. So it wasn't anything that we were recycling or anything. This is like it's a whole new thing, a whole new adventure. I mean, and it was 10 years later. So it's like I keep this pile of notes right? I keep the pile of notes, and I never get able to, I'm never able to go back and like, oh yeah, I'm gonna like resurrect that because now the situations have changed,
They
unfortunately.
did take an element from that show though and resolve it in Young Justice. I don't know if you saw.
I still haven't seen that episode, but but that's. I mean, we need to get Green Lantern the animated series on for another 26. There's a lot of stories that they wanted to tell, obviously.
We have Hawkgirl, we have Adam Strange, we have John Stewart. We have these intergalactic characters on this intergalactic adventure, and Oliver Queen. Talk about how he kind of fits into this.
Well, it's just, that I think that was Jim Krieg's way of giving a nod that we're using Oliver Queen instead of someone else, instead of him going with Kilowog, right? Another thing that we didn't want to do was have one of the big three in this one, because then Jon Stewart becomes a bit player in his own origin story, right? So having Oliver Queen does two things. John's kind of an intense character, and we have him with PTSD. He's not a laugh riot, right? So Jimmy Simpson playing Green Arrow could be a little bit more of some levity, some comic relief in that, and he's the most unsuited person to take into space. He has a bow and arrow, right? So sometimes writers do like to make themselves a challenge, right? But mostly it is just a nod. That because he was on Hard Traveling Heroes, why not use him again? Though it's not the Hard Traveling Heroes story at all, because that's Hal Jordan in him.
Did this movie feel like an opportunity to mix it up and use some different characters that we wouldn't normally see? Not just Jon Stewart being the headliner, but some other characters like an Adam Strange that we wouldn't necessarily see in a featured movie like this.
Yes. Excellent observation, my friend. There's other ones. They kind of bubble up, right? I mean, obviously, you might have noticed that Batman appears in a lot of films, and Justice League, because they are the most popular and they make the most money. To get another character like, say, Constantine broken in, first usually he's got to share the screen, and then you can have a Constantine, right? So in this case, Warner Brothers was really cool in that they're like, no, we want to clear the boards and we want this to be a Jon Stewart Green Lantern story, that he's going to be the guy in at least this continuity. So I think it's quite a big swing, and if this one does well, then maybe we can adapt the more famous Jon Stewart comic runs. Part of the object of this is to lift Jon Stewart up into the pantheon with our big three and Flash, right? To make it a big five. So I think it's like overdue.
Did you feel a lot of pressure kind of holding that over you, being like, if this succeeds, then we're gonna have more?
Oh man, well, you can't let the pressure get to you, but John and I both really love the character. I've read him a lot. When I was little, I was like, all Green Lanterns are cool, but this guy's like really badass, and so I'm hoping that the fans react positively. We shall see. I'm like 50-50. Some things I'm like, oh, they're going to love this. And it's like, ooh, they didn't like that. And then other ones I'm like, I'm not so sure. It's like, oh, we love it. So you never know.
How good is it to have a venue like, virtual stuff is great, don't get me wrong, but what's it like to have a venue like this, like Comic-Con, to be able to launch a movie like this and maybe put more eyes on it and give you something even better opportunity to get that goal that you were just talking about?
I think it's way better. I mean, I think there's nothing can come close to having a shared experience in room 20 or a hall H. I mean, room 20 is like over 4,000 people. It's 4,250 people to watch together rather than, by yourself or doing these virtual events, which they're fine. But I think this is far better to do this stuff and to get the word out to you guys, and have you guys spread the word also, So I'm very happy,
I'm curious, do you have an experience between, how does the experience of writing a feature animated film compare to episodic television? Do you have a preference?
I like them both, and I think it's a lot different than people might think. I mean, with a run of comics, it's always too long to put everything into a 72 or 80 or even 90-minute film, right? But when you're doing like an animated series, you can take a single issue, and unfortunately, that single issue sometimes is like, oh well, that was the first act or the teaser. Now we have to build more. So they're always too short. So one is too short for a half hour, but any run of any significance is way too long for one movie. There you go.
Was there any part that you had to cut when you guys initially did the first draft? Was there a section up there like, this is just either not working or not going to make it? That's more of a Butch question, but there were some trims between Jon Stewart and Hawkgirl about the nature of what it is to be a warrior, that they had to go for time. It's still a long movie, but I kind of miss some of those, And there was an initial scene where they were on Earth and they were doing some of the hard travel and things, and it was like, wow, there's too many backgrounds whipping by, like we can't do it. And so then the decision was made, we got to get to space much faster. And even now, it's like 85, 87 minutes. It's one of the longer ones.
Last question.
Okay.
1 mile.
Or was that a good last one?
Anyone want it?
I'm good.
If you guys get a next one, what would you like to see happen?
Oh, I mean, I'd like to do another exclusive Jon Stewart story, like Rise of the Alpha Lanterns, or the Lantern War, where he would be the lead. That would solve a lot of problems that fans say, because we could have Guy Gardner, Kyle Rayner in it, right? But the focus would be on Jon. I think that would be really cool to do, And I'd watch it as a fan.
Perfect.
If I don't get to do it. All right.
Thank you.